Basically, today I'm just going to talk about really only 3 or 4 works, but I'm going to show you 7 and a lot of like behind the scenes, behind the music, how it was done, kind of VH1 special situation. To kind of ground this talk on waves and interference and haptics and sound and infrasonics. I wanted to look back at a 2018 show that I did with Amal Dublan, collaboratively with Amal Dublan at Artist Space, and a portion of it is up right now in Germany too. But I wanted to come back to it because it's like obviously waves and interference, and that show operates a little bit like foreshadowing for some of the work that I'm going to show you. Foreshadowing in that way where if you see a movie or a play and it's got a gun, by act 3, that gun is going to get shot somehow. And I guess I'll start by saying we made an interferometer, and interferometers, as you may or may not know, are what you need to make holograms. So in 2018, I made an interferometer with Mont Blanc, and by 2019, of course, the holograms came out. But to come back to this is a projected video piece that actually is a sound. It's made from a sound piece, taking a synthesizer that plays waves like sound waves, and then into a ripple tank. So it's a synthesizer that that plays sound waves into water and then produces that water wave as image. Now, the point behind this work was, of course, around some defunct or rejected, but ones that I really, really like, field theories around wave particle duality. And I like that kind of like holding intention or interference patterning that's produced, but also the kind of concept and material of two things being simultaneously impossible. So I'll come back to that. And here's an interferometer. If you don't know what an interferometer is, it looks like this. It can look a lot of different ways. It usually has 2 arms. Sometimes it has one that doubles back on itself. Um, and it really just crosses light beams at right angles. It can cross a number of different things, like gravitational waves are also discovered with using an interferometer as well. But this one uses laser light, shoots it through at right angles, and produces interference patterns and actually erases them. This experiment is a demonstration and in classical physics of a like kind of analogy to um, quantum physics. So this literally shows classical entanglement and in quantum entanglement. If you're lost, don't worry. Everybody is lost when it comes to quantum entanglement, including the people who like coined the term and did all the experiments. This one is called the quantum eraser, and it's configured to a 1999 experiment that shows quantum entanglement. And this is a kind of behind the scenes view where I blew some vapor onto the beam of light, which you normally don't see. And here it kind of produces much akin to how if you like have a lot of dust in a flashlight beam, you'll see the beam more. So I did that so you can see in this area that it's actually, crossed. And I should go back and actually image describe both myself and all of this. So I'm sorry. I'm Tina. I got a red hat on. I have white skin and brown hair. Um, it's kind of tucked up in a baseball cap. I'm wearing overalls. My shirt is really soft, but also a little bit starched in the collar, and there's multiple collars. So there's kind of layered feel going on. Very fall. Behind me looks like giant grass coming in my windows, which is supposed to be a digital background, but a virtual background that is failing right now. Um, and these images thus far have been overlapping waves of interference patterns. It's kind of like a photo of a dark room with a white wall that stops several feet from the ceiling. And then there's these concentric rings of white light from 2 sources, from the upper right and then also from the upper left, that the corners of the screen are projected onto the wall and they overlap. And it creates a kind of like fuzzy, almost feels like particles are being made from this overlapping wave. So it's like, it feels very textural and soft. Um, the second image was a bunch of scientific, like hard feeling instruments, very like pristine and a little bit cold and calculated, but also kind of cute because it looks like a plaything or like a Legos. It's like if Legos were super serious. They're literally scientific instruments from like a physics lab, configured to like exact specifications, down to like very, very small measurement. Um, and there's a kind of green glow coming on some of the surfaces of lenses and beam splitters, uh, and mirrors and polarizers. And then there's a kind of hazy green glow in the background that is two beams being overlapped on a wall. What you don't see outside this image is another one on the other corner of the wall. But you do start to see that here in this third image, which is in the dark. It's lit up, it's like dark black with a green glow. And sometimes I'm going to say these colors and they might not mean anything, or we might all have different versions of what green is or could be. But when you kind of focus on the feel, which I'll come to later when we get to the color red, or rather the frequency and vibe red. On the right, you see some what look like, I don't know, like alien thumbprints, concentric like rings that look like almost like they've been stamped in ink, very bright glowing green ink. They show complementarity where the inner rings of one starts dark and proceeds in concentric rings of green glow. And on the right hand side, the opposite of that, it starts out very light and proceeds in darker rings. This is kind of an evidentiary claim of science to say this light is entangled. And that's important because it kind of speaks to this idea of extra visuality, right? Like it's like this is an image that is made visual for us, but it's not actually it's not a representation at all. It's almost diagrammatic, where it's indicative of, and it works similar to something like an instrument panel indicating that there's something to do or that there's something has been done, rather than so it lives in the realm of the experiment. And it's like, yes, it's visualized, but it's specifically extra visual because it doesn't actually represent any specific thing. What's actually happening is something beyond vision, or beyond the ocular centric idea of vision. Of course, it has vision in other forms. This third one, I'm just going to play a short excerpt for. This is the third piece in that suite of works that is the video of the interference sound machine in waves, and then the actual interferometer producing and crossing light waves. And then this third one uses a vocoder and some crossed sound, modulated sound that focuses on, it's a video of captions, and those captions are open. And open captions, if you know the history of captions in the United States, open captions are single channel, which means they're suffused with the screen, whereas closed captions happen in a 2-channel system or a 1.2 or 1.1 system, depending how you want to think that second file, which is very small. And so for the history of closed captioning in media in the United States on a public broadcast level, has a lot of different like starts and stops. One of which is that it starts out open captions, where the images of the caption is suffused with the image of the video. And what happens along the way, of course, is it becomes a kind of opt-out issue, like, or opt-in, or sorry, an opt-out issue, where it's like, oh, if you don't like that, you can turn off the track of the captions, which then, of course, because of things like representation and visuality, and the lack of it being seen, ends up being an opt-in, right? So instead of having to opt out, you can opt in. And then beyond that becomes this kind of issue of now you're at this point where a lot of people don't use them because they're not seeing them being used. And there's been a little bit of a resurgence of people picking up captions a little bit more. But it's important to kind of know that for me, that call, and for a lot of other uh, disabled and deaf artists and all kinds of people, anybody who wants to get with it. This is a specifically aesthetic turn, right? It's an aesthetic turn that says this is too much, or simultaneously not enough, right? That there's like there's a kind of there's a it's like being told that captions are too they're in the way, that they're in the way, that they're blocking something else, that they are in their inclusion or excluding something else, or basically that they're, for lack of a better term, ugly. And I love ugly, but this is the kind of slur that gets used against the idea of the open caption that the text suffused with image. So in this video, Maud Blanc and I pretty much just occlude the image. We close the image and we open the captions and keep it pretty simple. I'm just gonna play a short excerpt, but you're welcome to cruise my Vimeo if you want to see the whole thing and hear the whole thing or experience it in whatever way you do.
One of my earliest memories is sitting in the backyard in Mount Vernon, trying to figure out if it was ontologically possible to switch breakfast and lunch.
Mass arises in the ensemble where it doesn't exist in the part.
December 7th, I tried and failed to tell them that the projector was losing mass as we watched this video, that the dissemination of light that held and had the image was a conversion of once stored energy into what we were beaming on. I even blew vapor onto the beamer light to show its path. The security team blew back at me. I swore it was matter, a physical material to make something with. But none of this mattered. Matter isn't mass, and after all, the projector was plugged into an outlet. Time itself curved away from everything we wanted to call to its grid. Everything we wanted to say about falling in love remained still in our 17 inertial planes. Something still distant to us each, and reaching us all. The day was almost over, and the day had never begun. The semester becomes the largest geodesic discussion. One.
A frame
consists of axes and pucks. Two. More than space that is time that is curved. And what is it to fall in love? We can't even fall through space-time.
All right, I'm gonna cut it there. There's just a little more stuff, but you can watch it on your own if you want to. Obviously, that was kind of like a love and space-time journal. It was kind of like the notes that I kept alongside, and that Amal also kept alongside the production of the rest of that work, including the text. But I want to start the actual talk now. I just wanted to kind of ground it in that I've been thinking with waves and sound and text and image for quite some time, and much longer than 2018. But I thought that was like a cute kind of preview. This is what I want to show you: some holograms and haptics as promised. So this is, and the best show to show you that with for me is a solo show in 2019 at Participant Inc. Right before the coronavirus stuff popped off. So it was like, this was very much an IRL being with kind of show. Definitely not a show I would do, even a couple months later in this particular way, although I would find a way. And even no way can be a really cool way too. But this Participant Inc. on the Lower East Side, and the show is called L&D Motel. And there's really only two pieces in this work, and what we're looking at right now this kind of like a long dark channel that's that is lit up all red, but everything else is black and or blacked out in some way. So the walls are all like a matte kind of like soft velvety theater black, like very evocative of the black box of performance, and not the like blue digital space or the white cube of the gallery. Um, and then there are two sculptures in the kind of video that belongs with the sculpture in the back. On the right, there's a case of acrylic case of like glowing like gems. Those are the holograms that we'll get closer to in a minute and go through. And and there's kind of like a diffused red glow from that case, and then like a couple lights above in the back. And actually right now from the door is like a long shot view of a ramp, almost like a skate ramp that like curls up the back wall. Like it doesn't really go anywhere, but it's like more like something to be enacted, like a skate ramp or a bed, or seed bed, or however you want to think this. So it acts kind of architectural from this view, and much more like an object and even furniture when it's engaged. Um, and then there's the only other things of real note, other than I don't think we see the headphones on the wall, but there's an audio description first up, and there's a little bit of glow from a projector on that's mounted on the floor and one that's mounted in the ceiling. And then there's a little bit of a glow of media players in the back. Um, and what's important about this show is that it's just like sculptures made of waves, and specifically made of waves that are held at very particular thresholds. The threshold located at the idea of visible light for sighted people, and like meaning using red, which is like the lowest frequency. And I said prior that I'm not even really thinking like a color. We call a color red that means a specific frequency. So color and frequency are like synonymous if they're at a certain place on the electromagnetic spectrum. And red is like the kind of the first color that sighted people can see, sighted human people can see. Obviously, the other end, violet and blue, is the other end, and then ultraviolet humans can't see, but bees can, and stuff like that. And any other form of that dips below or above those thresholds are considered, invisible. Um, so I wanted to play right at that threshold of where images like possibly can dip in and out of sighted vision, and to like kind of privilege images that have that kind of slippage, and then to also think about that threshold in infrasonics as well, in sound. So the back ramp piece is actually an instrument. It's modeled after those magic finger beds from roadside motels. That's why the show is called L&D Motel. And if you don't know Magic Fingers, you're really missing out. But it was like this, kind of, you put quarters in the bed and it would vibrate and shake. It's supposed to be like a massage, but it was always at like the kind of motel that you really only stay in for a few hours or a night or two. Like it was definitely a kind of roadside situation. And it had that kind of seedy red light district feel to it. But for me as a kid, well, I guess it was also that, but mainly it was just dumping a lot of quarters in there and like and feeling the vibrations. Um, and participating is a space that even historically, like, I guess I should say this real quick about red. What I mean when I say it's a frequency, I mean not literally. That's like science stuff. Um, but what I actually mean is not about science. It's about feeling. Like red is a vibration. It's a specific vibration, and like the way it works on material level is that red is like a long curl. It's like the wave of it is like I'm moving my hands right now, like pushing my fingers together and then pulling them apart, like I got Laffy Taffy in my hands. So I'm kind of mimicking a wave, and the wave of red is really elongated or stretched out. It's like a curl in someone's hair that's like loose, like a loose curl. And because of this, it said it's associated with things like the Doppler effect and even in various other things because it's like stretched out time. So you'll hear scientists say when you look at red, or you are like literally looking into the past. So you probably heard of things like redshift. Um, so there's a kind of like elongation to red, whereas like blue is like associated with a kind of futurity because its wave, and now I'm pushing my hands back together for that curl, is all scrunched up and peaked much higher and lower. So there's a question of like time and travel that has to do with like that light. Obviously, the light itself travels at the same speed, but the frequency of the wave is materially different, even though we're going to register that as immaterial because we can't see it or it's not possible to be seen in certain ways. But I want to stay with the vibe of that because I was really trying to like feel my way through this show and think about like some of the history of performance space before it was not performance space. Wow. Shout out to Performance Space, but also this is Participant Inc. But Participant Inc. before it was a gallery was actually a sex club, among other various things. But so I was trying to like have that kind of conjuring space as well. Like, so the black is not just a reference to theater or performance, although that is key, or participation. I do view both of these works as participatory sculptures. But it's also, to kind of, make the feel of, I wasn't trying to make the feel of the club, but like that was inevitable with like black walls and the red light. So I want to get that idea across before we get to the ramp because it's going to become a little bit more important. All right, so now I'm switching slides. I got a closer frontal view of the case. It's like an 8-foot case made of like acrylic plexi that's completely see-through, except the bottom is lined in a black plexi, which makes it, and so it's real slick. Everything's very smooth and reflective. The clear stuff can literally be escaped or project, and then the black stuff almost acts like a mirror and bounces around. In the case are these little gems, like 7 little holograms set up in specific configurations to demonstrate kind of principles of the aleatory nature of probability and chance and risk and gamble, but also on an iconographic level and on a material level or performance level, they are literally demonstrating principles of holography, such as stereoscopic views, motion, the retainment of motion parallax, or what it is for an image to also kind of hold in superposition a really large sense of everything that we call objecthood. Or not everything, but many things that we call objecthood, such as stereoscopic views, which is a kind of 3-dimensional thing, and what's the other thing? Movement. Wow, I just said it, but I can't remember it. Motion parallax, which means that you can move the joint, you can move the thing, and it will also move. So unlike a regular photograph, a hologram, if I take a photograph and I move in relation to the photograph, I don't see another side of the apple. I see only what is there. But in a hologram, if you move around one view, you will actually see another view. So in this slide, it's just a kind of full-on view of the whole setup. There's a little crystal ball in the middle too. And then there's lasers and wires, and lasers are lighting the light path for these transmission holograms. And they're all on acrylic mounts. And those mounts are used in various ways to like kind of montage multiple images, or images that kind of act beyond their pictorial plane, beyond the filmic plane. There's a possibility for some image construction to collage between 2 holograms where no substrate is. And I also use the other mounts too. So the mounts are there for placement and kind of protection, and they're also there to do other things like occlude the next image. And that's what you'll see here. So on the right, you see there's 2 sets of holograms and a laser path that's lighting it up, and they're on these little cubes. And on one, you see just a cute like poker dice with the razor edge. It's like a real poker dice, casino type. Razor edge, glowing red. Um, and it's kind of suspended just like as a singular die. And then on the left, what you see is you see multiple, it looks like it's multiple dice, could be in time or in space, but it's occluded. It's like half of the image has been cut off by, and this happens because the back cube is literally blocking part of the path and creating a shadow. So it almost acts like if you look out a window and then you pull down the shade, it's acting like that, almost like a little shutter or shade. And there's the next image, I'm flipping back and forth to show you something pretty specific. So looking at that part where the shade has been pulled or the cube has created an occlusion that cuts the other image. When I flip back, I'm showing you another view where that's been pulled back. And that happens just by moving around the image, like walking to the left or to the right, or dipping down low, or just like changing the angle. So what you'll see is you'll see more dice are being revealed. And this is a really important, really, really fundamental idea, and not just idea, but material reality, right? It's a literal thing. So again, I'm being so literal, which is, when I went to school, there was like, they told me, really don't do that. Do not be literal. Like it was like cardinal sin of my art school was to be literal, but yeah, I'm just out here doing that anyhow. Okay, I think a better way to explain this idea, I'll just say it like this. When you cut a hologram, this is not just a PR. This is like a material thing that happens. Like, I'm not saying it's real because I'm not sure what's real anymore. But I tried to like get with what science calls real, right? Reality or the reality principle. And like just be like, okay, you say that it's a zero sum economy, that when you divide something, when you cut something, you divide it, you like, so that means that like even a photograph, you cut a photograph in half. If I have a photograph of a die, and I cut it in half, then I have half a die and half a die, right? But a hologram, if you cut it in half, you've got two whole die. And I know that sounds impossible, but again, we could argue about what's possible and impossible, but that's what happens. And I think this little 1970s video I'm going to show will explain that much more readily than I can. And I'm going to play it once and then, no, actually, I'll describe it first. So I wrote down a little description. So this is a short video clip that's shot on analog film, which is visible through the specks that appear on its surface. It shows a close-up of holographic film that spans a monument of two horses held in front of a laser, and that's the holographic image. Atop the right corner, a hand is going to cut a small corner of the hologram out with big scissors. They're kind of like comically large, I think. And then separate the two pieces of film to show that each piece of the hologram contains the entire light field, meaning that each piece of the hologram, no matter how small an entire recorded scene can be seen. Okay, the second part of the video shows a kind of diagram of waves that I'll come to as it happens. But let's play this because there's captioning and audio. But what I want you to just understand, you'll see it when it happens, you're gonna understand it's like you're cutting the hologram, but every tiny, you could cut this into 1,000 pieces, and every single piece would contain the information for the entire hologram. All you have to do is slide it along the frame where it once was, or move your body in relation to it. Basically, you change your frame of reference or move its frame of reference in relation to you, and everything will be there. So what I'm saying is when you cut a hologram, it's not a zero-sum economy that makes division be halved. Instead, division is doubled or multiplied, depending on how many cuts you make. So I'll play this now. And if there's anything I'm missing, maybe somebody can add it in the chat or read it out later, because I hope I'm
Holograms can create completely three-dimensional pictures, and every piece of the film can reconstruct the entire image. In order to understand holography, you have to understand something about waves. When waves meet, their effects are additive. When two crests meet, we get an increased effect. But when crest meets trough, their effects cancel out. This interference effect is important in holography.
These next videos are just behind the scenes. Like I said, I would show you the kind of make in the studio. So these are some of the same. One of these is the same hologram from the case, and several of them are just extra studio tests. And what happens is, like, I'm just showing you the views here, that the holograms do, most of them, most of the visuals for the holograms is absolutely nothing, like nothing to see. It's only at certain views that you get these like really gem-like, pretty convincing, glowing 3D images. And again, this is a kind of a good example of the motion parallax, where you can like kind of get around the dice. On one time, you're looking at one side, you see the 5, and then the camera pans around the corner and you can see the 3 underneath and the 1 on the other side. You can literally, quote unquote, walk around the image, which is a thing I think we usually reserve for sculpture, not 2D imagery. And then of course you go all the way behind and you see there's nothing there. All of this, of course, is just created by an interference pattern etched into the surface of the film, and actually within the kind of emulsion of the film. And all that happens because of like crossing light paths at right angles. It's that interference that actually produces this imagery. Okay. All right, so yeah, these images, just as they look on a still level, they are small glass plates, about 2 inches by 3 inches, about the size of like a credit card, um, that have holographic, like 3-dimensional views of dice that feel like little rubies, little gems. They almost feel like jujubes or something. I'm thinking like a kind of mouth feel situation where you could kind of chew on it a little bit. And some of them are on flat planes and some of them are on cubes, and the camera's kind of panning around them so that you can see a bunch of different angles, and the biggest angle of all, which is absolutely nothing, like nothing to see. Again, the surfaces, the background is like my messy studio, and some dust, but the surfaces are mostly, and there's some scientific apparatus, like you'll see the interferometer laser in the background there, and some little clips to hold the things in place, and everything's on like slick black acrylics that produce reflective beams to saturate the image a bit more. All right, this next one, this is just this is just a view from the side of the case. So this is not a hologram. This is like pure like Yayoi Kusama infinity mirror, like all the jewels came out to dance, and kind of situation. It's like all of the little, it's a close up of the side of the case where all the little mounts are being repeated through the glass, and it kind of breaks the space of everything that it's supposed to be containing. It looks like it's going through that slick black floor, and everything's very, very crisp, a little bit sci-fi looking, but also kind of bedazzled. So picture like I'm like kind of running my hands on my thighs right now, feeling like these pants that I had back in like 1992 that had all the little like diamond studs on them that you could kind of like drag your fingers on. That's kind of how, that's the feel of what this thing looks like. But it was, that, to be clear, that's a photographic image. It was just like a like a happy little surprise view for those that took it. So this is that infrasonic ramp. This is an instrument. it's a 6-channel instrument that it's a 6-channel instrument that has, yeah, six transducers, and the transducer is a little different than a speaker in that it kind of moves material. So a transducer literally plays vibration, which is important when you're playing sound that's not audible. You don't want to just push air, you want to move material. So it's transducers that go down to like 5 hertz. So this piece is also sculpted waves, this time sonic waves, infrasonic waves, at a threshold, and that threshold is 20 hertz and below 20 hertz. So everything that this audio source happens is below 20 hertz, which is the like human capacity for hearing, for hearing people. Or I better said, we could say it's the incapacity of all humans for hearing, and the capacity elsewhere. So, and I guess I should also say there are, obviously, like the same way that bees can see ultraviolet, or said to be able to, rhinos and blue whales can see or can hear infrasonics. But they, despite their impeccably amazing infrasonic hearing, they never show up at my shows. And if anybody knows Outreach for the Animal Kingdom, hook me up. But this is for all like capacities and incapacities, this drops below the threshold of possibility. It's kind of made in response to a really amazing work that a lot of this work is really indebted to, which is by, among many people, but this specific one I'm thinking about is Carolyn Lazard's work, A Recipe for Disaster, which is on their website. If you want to check it out, it's definitely worth it. Maybe you already know it. But in that piece, like there's a phrase that says, if you can't share, no one gets any. And I was like, wow, that's such a negative construction. Like, it's like almost like a subtractive sculpture, because it made me think. I was like, well, now that some of the non-disabled art world wants to like start adding access, they want to add access, but it doesn't necessarily feel like they really want to like, get with this. Well, I won't say that, because some people are, but some of them, don't feel like they're trying to get with the people, with the disabled people. They just want to like have this like afterthought addendum of access. And I was like, well, why don't I just remove all that access, which has the result not of being inaccessible, but of actually being accessible. And a lot of artists right now are taking up this notion of working with access as a primary material. Many people on this call are doing that across their work too. And so there's kind of cross-cultural disability, deaf and blind communities that are getting with this idea in various ways, in quite like different ways, and kind of under a similar affective call to like think of access as a material, primary material in the work, not added after the work. Again, that idea, nobody wants the kind of like inclusion that is really just the site of a long-going exclusion. So, and like I told you before, I'm much more interested in occlusion in my work than the inclusion exclusion binary. So this ramp, a call to post. If you don't know what, the holograms are called a box bet, and this is called call to post. These are both gambling terms. You can look them up. Call to post is a bugle call that starts horse races, and box bet is a gambling strategy to group bets to increase your probability and help you pay. But the ramp is the way I made this is this piece is like, for feel by feel, and a lot of it is actually installed and by Fields Harrington, who was my assistant on this project, did all kinds of hologram test kitchens and literally climbed under this ramp. So yeah, so I can also say it's like maybe like for fields and by fields, like in that regard too. But I want you to understand that like this ramp is made literally by field. Like the first iterations of the audio are my voice reading a kind of space-time love letter kind of situation, similar but quite different from the one I played earlier with the Mont Blanc. And then in this one, a solo piece that exists as like kind of like epistolary crossed letters. Or journal, like a journal and a love letter, kind of interfering with each other. But this piece is like, so the audio channel is my voice reading a text, but being modulated with 5 hertz, 10 hertz, 15 hertz, 20 hertz. And if you don't know what a hertz is, it's a unit of measure for sound, kind of like, like decibels or whatever, like the hertz does frequency. And so the hertz that, if you've ever heard the song or felt the song Partition by Beyonce, that's 30 hertz. And 20 is, a lot below that, and 5 is so far below that it's going to feel like someone kicking the door or someone knocking on the door. It's going to rattle and shake. So imagine the feel you get when just a subwoofer plays 30 hertz, let alone when a transducer plays 5. So I kept the volume very low on this piece because it can get a bit rowdy. And the way that I modulated the sound, the way that I sculpted the sound was to wear a sub pack, like an infrasonic vest, so I could feel the vibrations. I didn't use I didn't use an image of a sign of a wave. I didn't use an editing program where I could like see the shape of a wave. I didn't use headphones where I could hear anything. All you would hear is clicks or nothing. Or that's all I would hear, because I don't have the best hearing for all these little nuances, though some people would probably hear some snippets around the 20 hertz line. But I felt it, right? So and then I made a platform and laid on that and began to sculpt the kind of compositions I want, phasing one channel to another. And there's 6 of them. So they're overlapped and they're occluding one another and they're passing back and forth. They're panning, they're modulating, all that stuff. And then I kind of suffused them in situ at the gallery by laying on the ramp and roping a couple friends into laying on the ramp with me and feeling through and passing, like feeling through someone else's feeling through the vibrations and passing that back and forth and kind of like getting together, like to make the kind of sounds, or not sounds, but feels, inaudible sounds that I wanted to feel. And some of those vibrations were kind of like a truck idling on a hollow road, or some of them were like a knock on a door. Some of them were literally, I tried to conjure the vibration of that Magic Fingers bed I told you about and go through the pattern as I remembered it, like the kind of mechanical massage. So this thing can really get going and goes through a composition that in the end becomes 2 channels, left and right. And so it's a 2-channel infrasonic sound piece that's synced and looped. And then, it's all built to 5% grade, like, which is ADA specification. Looks like a skate ramp. A couple people did skate it. They said it was great. There's a little hardwood lip at the front for transitions. And then there's captions. And the captions are because some people can hear snippets around the 20-degree threshold. So the whole piece is captioned because I don't know, who could ever hear what. And it presented this issue of, how I want to caption this. And because I didn't want to just give the whole text. The text doesn't exist as like a whole thing. It exists as a cross thing, but the 2 channels cross anyway. The sound is crossed inside. It's interference patterns. And so how would I do that with like captions? And how could I do that and still serve a kind of like, possible legibility or clarity without negating the heavy affect and vibe of this? And my solution, or my dissolution, was to overlap them. So there's channel 1 projected from the floor, and then channel 2 projected from the ceiling. And channel 1 is really bright and white, and channel 2 is like a little bit grayed down and a little bit dimmed on the projector. But they're shot in the same space, they overlap, and you can really see channel 1, right? Like it's bright and legible, and channel 2 is not so legible until someone crosses the path of channel 1 projector, which happens almost all the time. If you want to go to the bathroom or to the office, or you want to go near this ramp in any way, and it's a bit alluring, it's also the free seating, like, because the sides of the ramps are benches. So if you want to get over there at all, you're going to have to move past that projector. And when you do that, you're going to block that projector 1 channel, and it's going to throw your shadow onto the wall. And when you throw your shadow onto the wall by blocking out this one, the one channel 2 is going to appear in the space of your shadow, because channel 2 is not blocked by your body. Only channel 1 is. So what happens is you get this kind of cool thing that happens where you can pick up fragments underneath channel 1. Or sometimes you might only obscure or occlude part of channel 1 in movement. And so you'll get this thing where like channel 1 and 2 merge to make different sentences than I even made. They do some kind of thing that's more than some of their parts. And this was my my attempt of emulating the material way that the sound is hosted and moved in the ramp itself as instrument. And so there is clarity, and there's like also like a kind of capacity to block the captions, and you could stand there and read them if you choose, and you want to stay there for a while because they're also like synced and looped. I hope that's understandable. Maybe if it's not understandable, maybe someone else who was there could like explain it or something, but it sounds magical. It's so simple. It's literally just like you walk in front of one thing and the beam from somewhere else shows up in your shadow, which feels really cool when it happens. But it's like there's no trick. All of it's pretty revealed. These are just kind of behind the scenes sketches. They're 3D sketches, 3D renderings. I thought because it's Barnard Design, why not show some of the design? I mean, there's real design that goes into building things that have to be like as strong as the floor that they're on. Because of course this has to like support like, upwards of 40 people hanging out on it at once, including like whatever mobility aids or whoever's come tagging along, like so there was a lot of people on this ramp, like every there were a lot of events that we did. John Herman danced on this, brought in a Solange CD, popped it in, and we listened to this most stripped down version of Cranes in the Sky. And we had like Shelley was doing some really awesome audio description, live score happening in situ, and then the ramp was both stage and seating, so it was like kind of being with the party. Gia Wyeth came out and plugged in M. Lamar's synth, and we opened up all the channels. I took away the 2 channel and opened up all 6, played. He played an entire composition, and I don't know, threw every kind of thing on there, from coins in his pockets to like other chairs, and watched them dance around. So these are 3D renderings of weights and measures and materials and kind of mapping of the audio channels. And this is a close-up of the captions piece, which I titled separately because this piece is its own piece. I would never show the ramp without the captions, but I'm down to show the captions without the ramp. And I like that idea of like as if the ramp was like the extra, you know, that we could do without, that we could opt in, or you know what I mean? Like, and that this was primary. Also, this just like does kind of function as its own kind of sculptural installation as well. I mean, the video being looped is also kind of walking around you. And it's called All the Time. And it's a 2-channel open captions for the speech that's above 20 or at or above 20 hertz. When I say above, there was no thing that was actually put in above 20 hertz, but to be clear, because the ramp has space underneath it, it produces its own speaker. It becomes a speaker. I actually had a friend clear out the basement space right below the ramp too, so that it would actually be a kind of speaker, like, and use the basement, the hollow of the space under the ramp, to become its own instrument. So there was sound, like audible sound, that became produced, none of which was, you know, actual like words or anything like that, but just kind of cacophonous stuff that would happen intermittently and, to me, seemingly erratically. But this is a close-up shot of the captions as they're installed channel 1 over channel 2. And it reads that love's holographic, that touch is impossible, but we do it anyway. And underneath it, there's some kind of postulate about a number, but your kid gets occluded by the rest of it. And that's the main read. So it's really talking about this idea of like touch at a different distance, or the impossibility of gather. And then obviously the kind of contiguous and non-contiguous ideas of haptics and touch. I know some people have said it feels a little bit premonition for COVID and physical distancing. And yeah, okay. I mean, we did some other things at that space too about some of that. All right. This next one, this is up right now in Germany. It's not lit really great here. It's the cards are lit, but the holograms within the hologram card are not quite lit. This piece, this image is, it's like, it's holograms the size of a credit card with the image of credit card, specifically my credit card. So it's got my signature, it's got a bar scanner. They're kind of glowing in reds and oranges with little glints of yellow, and they're sitting in a black acrylic tray on a cement pedestal. And they just kind of look like a bit ethereal. And these are reflection holograms, so they don't need a laser. You need a laser to make them, but the lighting of them is just regular, you know, fluorescent bulbs above. And these are, let me see if I have this is a little bit better. This is in the studio shots. So I set these as takeaways. It's very similar to a piece I did in 2015 at the New Museum called Sweepstakes, where which was a class action lawsuit against NYPD for false arrest, among other harassments. And I just took the money that was allotted under my name and put it on credit cards, like the Visa gift cards, and put it out as takeaways. So takeaway art historically is, you know, I'm thinking the lineage of like Felix Gonzalez Torres, where you reproduce something, you have multiple copies of something, such that there's this idea of a democratic like possibility for people to have the work or take the work, keep it. It's like a handout, only the handout is art, not paper or food stamps. But in this case, I want to take that idea of what happens with takeaways is that they devalue as they become reproduced. And I was really kind of interested in playing with or toying with the idea of reproducing something quite valuable, such as, you know, credit cards or money. And in this case, I'm kind of following up on this idea. I did it once with gold in Switzerland. And again, they come back to things often named like things like sweepstakes or 3-card Monty that do go back to those kind of performance questions, those around disability and blackness and uh, gender, like all the things we discussed prior, that I think it was Alice who articulated really beautifully in the chat. But this one is my credit card, and yes, you can use it. Obviously, can't put this into an ATM, but all of the information needed to like perfectly copy somebody's credit card is here. But I didn't. But to be clear, this is not my credit card, right? This is an art piece that makes a holographic picture of my credit card that just so happens to contain a hologram in it. And holograms, I think, Visa, like different cards use like signature versions. The Visa's is a dove, the Visa dove, to kind of make there as a security measure, so that because it's really hard to copy holograms apparently. I thought it did a pretty good job. These are not all these are full spectrum reflection holograms, so they will change color based on how you light them and where you look at them. These, I just shot from certain angles, so they're like the glamour shots, but when they're in the gallery, they can look like this if they're not specifically lit at specific angles. And then notice on this was sorry, I should describe this again. Wow. These are glamour shot versions of the last slide, where now you can see the dove lit up in a bunch of different frequencies and in motion and in movement. And the card has like a little bit of interference. Like these are like a little bit overbaked, honestly. My emulsion's a little bit runny on these, but I think that was like really pretty. Like, and I wasn't too proud to have, like, I actually thought these were like the really beautifulest ones, most beautiful ones. And they're on glass mounts, just like the dice holograms, only they're not on cubes. They're just flat, like an actual credit card. So they have a heft to them, but also a kind of dainty, like, again, with the jujube, like starburst picture, like a now and later chew. That's kind of what's going on in the center of these. And then, like, of course, I said it as a takeaway, and people took it away, and I just got a bill for skincare in Berlin. So somebody's having a nice time with these. I'm probably going to cancel it soon if it gets too wild out there. But that's what's going on. This was to show the light path in case anybody was interested. It's a diagram that shows my actual credit card down. It's kind of blurred out to protect my information from whoever's watching this talk, because yeah. And it's just got like the path of the laser beam pointing using the interferometer to show how it's shot on a single arm, so it reflects back on itself. And then this one is just a little candy to show you how the lighting works, which is that it looks murky, almost like the feel of like dirty creek water that's got a little silt in it. And then imagine like a kind of clearing comes through and lights things up. And that's those are the Visa doves. I'll tell you more about them when I find out, everything I feel about them.